What would you do if someone showed up at your doorstep, smiling like an old friend, only to tell you they were taking over your land? Not asking, telling. That's exactly what happened to me. I grew up on a farm, surrounded by rolling fields, crisp morning air, and the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts. My parents ran a small, self-sufficient farm, and while it was hard work, there was a rhythm to it: early mornings, long days, the satisfaction of working with your hands. There were no blaring sirens, no endless traffic, no one telling us how high our grass could be or what color to paint the barn. It was just us, the land, and the kind of freedom that only comes from owning something outright. After spending too many years trying to squeeze myself into a city life that never fit, I finally made the choice to go back to my roots. I spent months searching for the perfect place, somewhere far enough from the chaos, somewhere I wouldn't have to deal with nosy neighbors or rules made by people who had nothing better to do. When I finally found the land, I knew it was the one. It wasn't much, just a few acres, an old barn that needed work, and an open stretch of sky that reminded me why I had left the city in the first place. Most importantly, it was mine. The first few days on the farm felt like a dream. I woke up to the sound of birds instead of honking cars. I spent my time fixing up the barn, setting up my new life, breathing in air that didn't smell like gasoline and office buildings. It was everything I had hoped for. Until the morning Maggie Whitmore showed up. I was out near the front gate, repairing some storm damage, when I saw the car pull up. It was a sleek, spotless SUV that looked wildly out of place on the dirt road leading to my farm. At first, I figured it was someone lost. GPS can be unreliable this far out. But when the door opened and a woman stepped out, smiling like she already knew me, something about it felt off. "Hi there," she called out, walking toward me with the confidence of someone who thought they belonged. "I'm Maggie Whitmore, president of the HOA for the neighborhood down the road. Just thought I'd stop by and introduce myself." HOA? My gut tightened. I wasn't part of an HOA. That was the whole point of moving out here. I wiped my hands on my jeans, forcing myself to stay polite. "Nice to meet you, Maggie. But I'm not part of your neighborhood." "Oh, I know that," she said with a laugh, like we were sharing some kind of inside joke. "But I think it's always good to have a friendly relationship with your neighbors. We all benefit when the area looks well-maintained and cohesive, don't you think?" I didn't answer right away. There was something too smooth about her tone, like she was laying the groundwork for something I wasn't going to like. "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I'm not really looking to join any neighborhood associations. I like to keep to myself." Maggie's smile didn't waver. If anything, she looked pleased, like I had just said something she expected. "Of course. Totally understandable. But, you know, the HOA has some wonderful resources for land maintenance, property improvements. We even have programs to help with things like fencing and landscaping." I didn't miss the way her eyes flicked to my barn, my unpaved driveway, the patches of grass that had yet to be tamed. I suddenly understood what this was. This wasn't a friendly visit. This was a warning. I figured that would be the end of it. People like Maggie, smooth talkers who think they can sweet-talk their way into control, usually get bored when they realize you aren't going to play along. But Maggie wasn't like most people. A few days later, just as I was getting into the rhythm of farm life, she came back. This time, she wasn't empty-handed. When I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, I turned to see her stepping out of her SUV, holding a neatly wrapped box. She walked toward me with the same bright, rehearsed smile. "I thought I'd bring you something," she said, holding up the box like a peace offering. "The neighborhood just had a bake sale, and I figured you might appreciate some homemade cookies. Just a little neighborly gesture." Neighborly gesture. Right. The same kind of neighborly gesture that came with a sales pitch. I glanced at the box but didn't take it. "That's nice of you," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But I'm all set. Maggie barely hesitated. "Oh, I'm sure you are," she said with a laugh, as if we were sharing some unspoken joke. "But you know, the HOA offers a lot more than just friendly visits. We have amazing programs for property upkeep. You might not realize it, but a well-maintained property really benefits everyone in the area." And there it was, the real reason for her visit. I felt my jaw tighten. "I take care of my land just fine," I said. Her smile stayed in place, but there was a flicker of something behind it, something calculating. "Of course. But I think you'll find that a little coordination with the community goes a long way. If you ever change your mind, we'd love to have you involved." I didn't respond, and after a few seconds, she finally took the hint. With one last lingering smile, she placed the cookie box on my porch railing and left. That should have been the end of it. But 2 days later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox, stamped with the bold letters HOA Notice of Violation. I opened it, expecting to see some generic flyer, but what I found made my blood boil. The letter accused me of multiple, community standard violations, overgrown grass, unapproved structures, improper fencing. It even claimed my barn's color didn't match the aesthetic of the area. It was complete nonsense. My land wasn't part of the HOA. Their rules didn't apply to me. But the language in the letter was just vague enough, just official-looking enough, to make someone unfamiliar with legal boundaries second-guess themselves. I tossed the letter onto the table, determined to ignore it, but the next day, I found something worse. I had just finished working on a fence post when I saw them, 3 people, casually strolling along the edge of my property. 2 men and a woman, all dressed a little too neatly for a casual walk through the countryside. At first, I thought they were lost. Then I saw the way they were looking around, like they were assessing something. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and walked toward them. "Can I help you?" The woman, a polite-looking blonde in business casual, smiled. "Oh. We're just checking out the land. Maggie mentioned it was okay to take a look around." A slow, cold anger spread through me. "She told you what?" The woman looked slightly uncomfortable. One of the men, a stiff-looking guy in khakis, cleared his throat. "She said this land was community-friendly. That the HOA is working on incorporating more green space for everyone to enjoy." I took a step closer, making sure they saw the seriousness in my expression. "This is private property. No one, including Maggie, has permission to give you access." The woman's face turned pink. "Oh. We didn't realize. Now you do." They mumbled an apology and hurried back to their cars, but I stood there for a long time after they left, fists clenched at my sides. Maggie wasn't just persistent. She was testing my limits, seeing how much she could get away with before I fought back. Well, she had her answer. The next morning, I was done playing nice. I called Maggie directly, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "You told people they could walk around my land?" I didn't bother with a greeting. There was a brief pause, then her voice, light and unconcerned. "Oh, Ethan. I assume you ran into some of our friendly neighbors? I might have mentioned that your property was a lovely open space, so many people enjoy a natural, well-kept landscape. It's only natural for the community to take an interest." I clenched my teeth. "My property is not open space for the community, Maggie. This is my land, and if I catch anyone else trespassing because of something you said, I'll be calling the sheriff next time." A long, measured silence stretched between us. Then, a soft chuckle. "I see. Well, no need to be so hostile. I just thought you'd want to be part of something bigger. But if you insist on keeping to yourself, I understand." She didn't understand anything. And worse, I knew this wasn't over. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. No strange visitors, no new letters. I started to think, naively, that maybe she had finally backed off. But then the surveyor showed up. Tom Harris arrived one afternoon in an old truck, a reliable man with a reputation for being fair and thorough. I had hired him to officially document my property lines, just to be safe. But when I met him at the fence line, something about his expression was off. "Look," Tom said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I wasn't gonna say anything, but I think you should know, Maggie Whitmore reached out to me before I came here." A slow, sinking feeling settled in my gut. What did she say? She wanted me to, let's say, find some issues with your property lines. Make it look like your fence encroached on HOA land. He looked at me seriously. Offered me a nice chunk of cash, too. My blood went cold. Tom shook his head. "Don't worry," I turned her down flat. "I don't play those games. But she's gunning for you hard, Ethan." I thanked him and let him get to work. Sure enough, when the report came back, my property lines were exactly where they were supposed to be. Maggie's claims were complete fiction. But that didn't stop what happened next. One night, I was woken by an unsettling noise, something metallic, creaking. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, scanning the fields. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then I noticed it, the livestock gate swinging open in the wind. My stomach dropped. I ran toward the fence, already knowing what I would find. The padlock had been cut clean through. My animals, some of them, were missing. I spent the next few hours rounding them up, cursing under my breath. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had done this on purpose. And then, the next morning, I found my well had been filled with concrete. I stared at the ruined water source, heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't just petty harassment anymore. This was sabotage. I stormed to my truck, ready to drive straight to the sheriff's office, but as I turned onto the road, I hit the brakes. A new fence had appeared overnight, a tall, pristine wooden fence stretching across the entrance to my driveway, with an HOA logo nailed right to the front. I got out of the truck, disbelief turning to rage. Before I could even process how this had happened, my phone buzzed. It was Maggie. Her voice was all sunshine. "Oh, Ethan. I see you've noticed our little improvement. The HOA took the liberty of sectioning off a private access road for the neighborhood. We wouldn't want your, rustic property interfering with traffic patterns, now would we?" I gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might snap. "You put a fence on my land." "Well, technically, it's community land now," she said breezily. "You see, the HOA has filed an annexation request. It should be approved soon. Then we can help ensure your property aligns with our neighborhood standards." I could barely breathe. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was theft. I gritted my teeth, my grip on the phone tightening as Maggie's smug voice carried through the line. Annexation. She wasn't just harassing me anymore, she was trying to steal my land. "You don't have the authority to do that," I growled. "Oh, but the process is already in motion," Maggie said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "You see, when land is deemed underutilized or neglected, the HOA can petition to integrate it into our community. And considering your, rustic approach to maintenance, it wasn't hard to make a case." A slow, cold fury settled in my chest. "You lied." "I simply filed the necessary paperwork," she said, and I could hear the self-satisfaction in her voice. "And if you had agreed to work with us earlier, this could have all been avoided. But don't worry. Once the annexation is complete, you'll have access to all the wonderful resources our HOA provides. You'll be part of a real community." I ended the call before I said something that would get me into trouble. My hands were shaking as I drove straight to the county office, my mind racing. I had to stop this before it was too late. At the records department, I demanded to see any documentation related to the annexation request for my property. It didn't take long for the clerk to pull the file, and when I saw what was inside, my stomach turned. Maggie hadn't just lied, she had forged documents. According to the paperwork, I had abandoned my property months ago. There was even a fake signed statement from a so-called previous owner claiming the land had been vacant and unmaintained. Worse, there were community petitions attached, filled with signatures from HOA members, requesting that my farm be converted into a shared recreational space. It was all fake. A manufactured scam, designed to make my land look like a public nuisance instead of a privately owned farm. My hands clenched into fists. I wasn't just dealing with an overzealous HOA president. I was dealing with a con artist. I spent the next few hours gathering every piece of evidence I had, survey results proving my property lines were legal, security footage of Maggie and her cronies trespassing, the phony violation notices she had sent. Then I started making calls. The first was to the County Land Commission, informing them that the annexation request was based on fraudulent claims. The second was to a property attorney, who confirmed that if Maggie had forged legal documents, this was a criminal offense. And then I took the fight public. I uploaded everything, photos, documents, security footage, onto social media, exposing Maggie and the HOA's attempts to illegally seize my land. It went viral within hours. Comments flooded in from people horrified by what was happening. Even HOA members turned against her, realizing they had been manipulated into signing petitions under false pretenses. The next day, I got a call from the local news. They wanted to do a story. Maggie had spent months trying to quietly bully me into submission. Now, the whole town knew what she had done. And the authorities were paying attention. Maggie had spent so much time making herself untouchable, but the moment the truth came out, she crumbled fast. The public outrage was swift and brutal. News stations picked up the story, exposing how she had falsified documents, manipulated homeowners, and used HOA funds for personal gain. People who had once stood by her turned their backs, horrified by how far she had gone. Some of the very HOA members she had bullied into signing her petitions came forward, admitting they had been misled and pressured into going along with her schemes. The county launched a formal investigation, and within days, the annexation request was officially denied. But that wasn't all. The deeper officials dug into Maggie's activities, the worse things got for her. They uncovered misused funds, fraudulent claims, and even evidence of her tampering with legal documents. The HOA board had no choice but to remove her from her position, cutting ties with her entirely in an attempt to save themselves from liability. That didn't stop the authorities from pressing charges. Maggie was arrested on counts of trespassing, fraud, and falsification of legal documents. She went from being the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood to a disgraced criminal facing real consequences. As for me, I finally got the peace I had fought so hard to protect. The HOA was forced to remove the illegal fence they had built on my driveway, and all their false violations against my property were officially dismissed. I repaired the damage they had done to my farm, and for the first time in months, I could actually enjoy my land without looking over my shoulder. The people who had once backed Maggie avoided me now, too ashamed to admit they had ever supported her. And honestly, that was just fine with me. In the end, Maggie's biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me, it was thinking that she could take something that wasn't hers and get away with it. She believed she had enough power to rewrite reality, to twist the truth in her favor. But in the end, lies can only hold up for so long before they come crashing down. So, what do you think? Have you ever dealt with an HOA or a power-hungry Karen who took things too far? Share your stories below, I'd love to hear how bad it got for you.